Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today's class is on the Srimad-Bhagavatam. This is Canto 5, Chapter 12, Conversations between Maharaja Rahugana and Jada Bharat. We'll be reading texts 2 and 3 today. And the topic will be amṛtam, which actually translates as nectar, as we see here in the image, a nectar bowl. Usually we think of honey or some kind of beverage that's very tasty and sweet and life invigorating. So the verses. This is text number 2. Jaramayartasya yata kadam sat niragadagasya yata himamba kudeha manahi vidastadrishte brahman vachaste mrityam osadamme. So these are the word meanings from that verse. And as we can look to these different word meanings in orange, that's the Sanskrit. Towards the end there you see amṛtam, nectar, and osadam, which is medicine. And this is what we're going to talk about, the nectar and the medicine to cure the disease. As you'll see, he describes here amaya, by the disease. And so he will talk about that here. This is the translation. O best of the Brahmanas, my body is filled with dirty things, and my vision has been bitten by the serpent of pride. Due to my material conceptions, I am diseased. Your nectarian instructions are the proper medicine for one suffering from such a fever, and they are cooling waters for one scorched by the heat. This is the purport by Srila Prabhupada. The conditioned soul has a body full of dirty things. Bones, blood, urine, stool, and so forth. Nonetheless, the most intelligent men in this world think they are these combinations of blood, bone, urine, and stool. If this is so, why can't other intelligent men be made with these ingredients, which are so readily available? The entire world is going on under the bodily conception and creating a hellish condition unfit for any gentleman's living. The instructions given to King Rahugana by Jada Bharat are very valuable. They are like the medicine that can save one from a snake bite. The Vedic instructions are like nectar and cool water for one suffering from scorching heat. So that finishes the second verse. Now let's go to the third verse. Tasmad bhavantam mama samsayartam prakshami paschad aduna subodham adhyatma yoga gratitam tavoktam akyahi kotula chittaso me. So here's the word meanings here, very nice also. And as we could see, if we look at a few of those, this is the king Rahugana, is the word kotuhala chetasa, whose mind is very inquisitive to understand the mystery of the statements that were given by Jada Bharat, who was explaining to him how he was a self-realized soul and that he wasn't the body. And the king had just finished insulting him that, oh, you can't carry the palanquin properly? Oh, what are you, too fat? Are you too lazy or too tired or what? Anyway, we'll talk about that a little later. But here's the translation. Whatever doubts I have about a particular subject matter, I shall ask you about later. So this is the king speaking to Jada Bharat. For the time being, these mysterious yoga instructions you have given me for self-realization appear very difficult to understand. Please repeat them in a simple way so that I can understand them. My mind is very inquisitive, and I want to understand this clearly. So this is the good qualification of someone inquiring properly, submissively, not in a challenge spirit. So here's a purport by Srila Prabhupada. The Vedic literature instructs Tasmad Gurum Prapajeta Jnana Shreya Uttamam. An intelligent man must be very inquisitive to know the transcendental science deeply. Therefore, one must approach a guru, a spiritual master. Although Jada Bharat explained everything to Maharaja Rahugana, it appears that his intelligence was not perfect enough to understand clearly. He therefore requested a further explanation. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Tadviri Prani Patena Pare Prasnena Sevaya. The student must approach a spiritual master and surrender unto him fully. Prani Patena. He must also question him in order to understand his instructions. Pare Prasnena. One should not only surrender to the spiritual master, but also render loving service unto him. Sevaya. So the spiritual master will be pleased with the student and explain the transcendental subject matter more clearly. A challenging spirit before the spiritual master should be avoided if one is at all interested in learning the Vedic instructions in depth. So Srila Prabhupada has given us the whole process on how to properly approach a spiritual master. So this is what should be done with surrender and questions and service. So this is the process, not in a challenging spirit. So this chapter that we're reading from, it's broken down into 4 different parts here. So verses 1 to 4, Rahugana thanks Jada Bharat and inquires further. So this is what we read, verses 2 and 3. So we didn't read 1 or 4, but this is where he offers his respects and he tells him that his vision is tainted with pride and that his words are like cooling water, nectar, or medicine. So he wants him to simplify the instructions. So that's kind of what we read. And the rest of the chapter we'll see later. So here we see Jada Bharat there, standing with a simple cloth around his waist, and the king is actually kneeling down before him. So here he's recognizing the greatness of Jada Bharat. And we see while carrying the king in the palanquin, this Jada Bharat was very careful not to step on ants. So he kept stopping to let them by. And because of this, the palanquin was shaking, and King Rahugana began to criticize him sarcastically. And when the shaking still didn't stop, King Rahugana got very angry. He lost it. And being identified with the body, and therefore thinking himself a king, this Rahugana chastised Jada Bharat with harsh words. But Jada Bharat didn't become angry. But he spoke to the king, saying that he was not the body, and therefore not the carrier of the palanquin. And then Jada Bharat described to Rahugana the true nature of the soul. And then King Rahugana was amazed, and he got down from his palanquin and fell flat on the ground before Jada Bharat. And he recognized that he had tried to insult a great devotee, and he prayed that he would be, he prayed sincerely, asking who he was. So this is like the patient approaching the doctor. Sometimes we may think, I'm not feeling very good, or, can you give me some medicine to help cure this disease? Something like a cold, or, maybe we have cancer or some kind of problem that we want to go and get relief from, and this is important. But the king, Maharaja Rahugana, he's saying, I'm diseased, because he understands that he's living in a material conception, and he recognized that as a diseased state of life. And because of those material conceptions, he says, I'm diseased. He's not saying something like cancer or the flu or anything like that, but he says, because of my misconceptions or my material conceptions, I'm a diseased man. So this is actually the disease. It's a conception, the conception that I'm this body. And that conception is just based on false ego. And what is that false ego? The false ego is the sum total of all misconceptions. It's a sum total of all our misconceptions put together that is what creates the false ego. It's a misconception. That means it's a wrong idea, a falsity, an untruth. So the idea that I'm the body, the idea that I'm a man, a woman, Indian, American, strong, weak, intelligent, foolish, these are all misconceptions. And one who thinks in this way or views the world in this way is diseased. And so we can see practically the whole world is in this diseased position. So Prabhupada said one time that the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, ISKCON, is like a hospital. And that these temples all over the world are like hospitals where people can come and get treated for this disease of misconception. And it's actually like a fever that burns. You see, in the mode of passion, we're running around in a feverish condition. So this mana, pride, it's ahi, it's like a serpent. And vidasta, it's bitten. So this is what the king is saying, I'm bitten by this serpent of pride. Instead of looking for a pot of nectar, we actually have this pride. It's like a pot that's filled with snakes. And what happens? Eventually we'll get bitten. And this is a very nice analogy. The fever of misconception, and it's the analogy used by the snake bite, because the snake has its poisonous teeth, and when it bites you, that poison gets in your bloodstream, and it actually works its way up to your brain. And then what does it do? It actually boils the brain. It creates an intense heat in the body. So this is a very wonderful analogy that the intelligent king is using, because he understands the nature of the world, and he understands the nature of snakes and snake bites. So if you get bitten by a snake, one dies of intense fever, he burns up. So but he's saying that I have the fever of misconception. My disease is that I'm being scorched by the fever of pride, which, as we mentioned, is the expression of false ego. So, it's all shown by how we act, how we walk, what we say, all these things. And that's what Prabhupada says, material life is like a fever. We're burning by this fever. So when you have a fever, you're sick, and you want to reduce it. So you want to take some kind of medicine, something to reduce the fever. Because if it's not checked, you can actually die from it. And so Prabhupada said in the material world, people, they're all suffering from this fever of material life. But they're not trying to reduce that fever. They're actually trying to increase that fever more and more, that passion, to increase it. So people are becoming more and more proud, so what happens when there's a lot of proud people, they bump into each other, there's conflict. So that's the root cause of conflict, is pride. So Prabhupada would tell us how sometimes, we saw in his youth, he was seeing, and from being from India, the nation of China and India, although they were contingent, they touched each other in the northern part, in Tibet and Nepal, they lived peacefully together because the people of China and India, they were God-fearing, and they were close to God, and they were satisfied with what God gave them. But over time, as Kali Yuga came, people became more and more proud. And that's what nationalism means, pride. So now there's conflict between countries. We see that happening today between Russia and Ukraine. So this is what happens with this pride. So we have, and this is our enemy of a devotee, enemy of a spiritualist. So we have to really understand who I am, not thinking that, I am the enjoyer, I am perfect, I am powerful. This is actually what Krishna is. But we think that we are the supreme controller. It's actually a demoniac mentality. And so everyone in the world is thinking like that these days. So, but what is our real aham, our real ego? And that's what aham means, I am. But aham, we're not these things. We're not the source of everything. We're not the supreme perfect, powerful, but what are we? We're dasoham. This means that I'm a servant of Krishna. And if we live in this conception throughout our life, then there's no room for misidentifying with the material body, with the mind, with the intelligence. We become situated in a perfect conception of reality, that I am a servant of Krishna. And that's the teachings that were given by Lord Chaitanya, Jivara Sarup, that we should think ourselves like this, eternal servant of Krishna. But if we stop thinking like that, then what happens? The fever starts to rise again. The snake bite of pride, and it'll bite you. And it just takes a few minutes for that venom to rise to the body and come to the brain. So there's actually medicine for a snake bite, and it's given that there's a special medicine that's effective. It's actually mantra. So this verse talks about that medicine, Odyssey, and that's how you can remove a snake bite, through this medicine of mantra. So this is you see in India, there's some doctors, and once there was a lady that was bitten by a cobra, and she was rushed to the doctor, and that doctor, he took a pin and he pierced the skin on the toe where she was bitten. And then he began to chant mantras, and he started chanting his mantras, moving his hands down over her head and down past her neck, down her chest, and down to her legs, like that. And then he came to the toe where he made the puncture, so he kept doing that. So that's where he made that incision. And so what happened, there was blood coming out from that incision, and it was coming out red, but as he was chanting these mantras and moving his hands down, the blood started to come out black. And then several drops came out. They were all black. And then red came out again. And he said, okay, all right, the poison's gone. So now you're okay. So just chant Hare Krishna. So this is how that poisonous, powerful poison can be taken out through mantra. So in the same way, we can, if we bathe ourselves in these nectarian messages that are given in the Bhagavatam and from the devotees, then we can become freed. Because Krishna, it's described, is situated in everyone's heart, and he becomes very pleased when a person hears the narrations of his activities, and he personally cleanses the dirt from the mind of the listener. This is what he does. Hridi anto stohi abhadrani. This is that verse from the first canto. So he cleanses these things. He washes all the dirt from the mind. So this is what it really happens, and then immediately we could come to our original position of Krishna consciousness, and thus our life becomes successful. So all the great saints, in the devotional line, they strongly recommend the process of hearing. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu introduced the congregational chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra to give everyone a chance to hear Krishna's holy names, simply by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. One becomes purified. Therefore, this Krishna consciousness movement is chiefly engaged in chanting the Hare Krishna mantra all over the world. So these instructions that we receive are like cooling waters, like cooling showers. That's like someone who's scorched by the heat of the sun, the Nidargda Dagdasha from the verse. Then we can become satisfied by this Hima Amba, very cold water. So in the same way, the king's saying, please give me the medicine, which is cooling, and that water, so it can be cooled from the scorching heat by these nectarian instructions. So it's nectarian, it's cool, and it's like a medicine. It's transcendental kata, or Hari Katamrita. So it's spoken words about Krishna. So the Hari Katamrita means the nectar of Krishna's topics. So like we mentioned, in the mature world, you get sick, you take some medicine, and when you become cured, you don't need to take the medicine anymore. But the spiritual medicine, the transcendental messages of God, the Hari Katamrita, they're so relishable and so sweet that if you take the medicine and you take more and more, your disease becomes cleansed and it removes it more and more. But you don't ever stop taking the medicine because it's Nasta Prayasyo Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, that we want this Odyssey, this medicine, we want to take it every day. It's not only medicine, but it's amrita. It's Hari Katamrita. Amrita means life-giving, energizing, inspiring. That's the nature of Krishna's topics. So the more and more we take that nectar, the more and more we can relish it and purify ourselves from this ego and false pride, misconceptions, and enter into the association of devotees. And simply by taking that medicine, everything is cured. So during the Rath Yatra in Puri, there's another king, King Prataparudra, and he wanted to have the darshan, or the association of Lord Chaitanya. He wanted to see him and talk to him. So during the Rath Yatra festival, as you know, sometimes in the middle of the Rath Yatra, the cart stops for a day, right in the middle. So while the cart was stopping, and Lord Chaitanya went to a garden to take rest. And so under the instructions of some devotees, like Srup Damodar, they told the king that now is the time you can go there. Just go in a simple dhoti, dress. And Lord Chaitanya is in the ecstasy of Mahabhav because he was dancing before the Lord Jagannath, which is actually, Krishna. So he was lying there in complete ecstasy. So King Prataparudra came there and he started massaging his feet. And he started to recite some slokas. And these were nectarian topics, cooling waters from the slokas of the Srimad-Bhagavatam, from the Gopi Gita of the 10th canto. So he came to this one sloka which goes, and I'll show it here. It's Tava Katamritam Tapta Jivanam Kavibiriditam Kalmasa Paham Shravana Mangalam Shrimadatattam Bhuvi Grinantiye Burida Jana. So it's a beautiful, so he recited this verse, and Lord Chaitanya jumped up in ecstatic love and embraced Prataparudra. It's like, oh, and he didn't even see who it was, but he just heard that beautiful sloka. And he realized, oh, this is King Prataparudra. And he then said, go on, go on. And the king actually recited the whole Gopi Gita from the Srimad-Bhagavatam. That's in the 10th canto. So this is what happens, is that we want to take advantage of this nectar topics. And the more you chant them, the more relishable they become. We want to enjoy them more and more and more. And the more we enjoy them, the more we get into the mood of bhakti and purifying the heart. So this is nicely described there. So that's the translation of the verse. The nectar of your words and the descriptions of your activities are the life and soul of those suffering in this material world. These narrations, transmitted by learned sages, eradicate one's sinful reactions and bestow good fortune upon whoever hears them. These narrations are broadcast all over the world and are filled with spiritual power. Certainly those who spread the messages of Godhead are most munificent. So here we are, those words, vacha. They're like amṛtam, nectar, or asodam, it's medicine for us. So this is very important. We have to take advantage of this nectar. There's a nice song that Sanatan, it's songs from, it's called Krishna Deva Bhavatam Bande. This is one song. And it starts off this, O Sanatan, your lotus feet surpass even the nectar of the gods. So Sanatan means the Supreme Lord. And so he says, finding this lotus flower of your feet, the essence of sweetness, which is endowed with truly wonderful mallows, I pray that today the bee of my mind may eternally reside there. So there's another nice song. The refrain of this song is from the same song. So this is how it goes. And it's Krishna Deva Bhavantam Vande Manmanasa Marukaram Arpaya Nija Pala Pankaja Mamarkande. So he says, O Lord Krishna, I offer my obeisances unto you. Please fix my bee-like mind in the nectar of your lotus feet. So this is the nectar coming from the Srimad-Bhagavatam is none different than Krishna's, the nectar from his lotus feet. So Krishna is absolute. Everything about him and all his senses, he can do anything with any of his senses. His feet can be like transcendental words, and he can drink through his ears. He can do anything. He can accept the offerings from the devotees from his eyes, like the food stuffs like that. So Krishna is completely absolute. He is the supreme. So here, another analogy we could use to show like the guru and the disciple. So the guru is represented by the cow, the disciple is represented by the calf. And we see the grass there. So the calf receives the nectarian milk from the cow, which are like the instructions, which are like the Vedas, emanating from the mouth of the devotees. And this is handed down. The way the cow gets the milk is by eating the green grass. And that grass, it represents the parampara from guru to disciple, handed down purely. They're become representatives of the parampara. This is the proper way to get the nectar. For they say a child without education is like a bird without wings. It's a Tibetan proverb. So the soul is who we are, is like a bird without wings. And when we come to the mature world, we lose our wings, our spiritual wings. So these wings are the Shastras, the instructions given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So there's another beautiful verse that's offered to Krishna by Uddhava. As we see here, Uddhava is also approaching Krishna in a humble mood. And this is the verse. The translation is, O Almighty Lord, please be merciful and uplift this hopeless living entity. I think I show the background so you can see it there better. Who has fallen into the dark hole of material existence, where the snake of time has bitten him. In spite of such abominable conditions, this poor living entity has tremendous desire to relish the most insignificant material happiness. Please save me, my Lord, by pouring down the nectar of your instructions, which awaken one to spiritual freedom. So Uddhava is acting like he's one of a conditioned soul who's tormented by this terrible path of birth and death, and we're overwhelmed by the threefold miseries. So he's taking shelter of Krishna's lotus feet. He's saying they're just like refreshing umbrella that pours down showers of delicious nectar. So he sees that there is no other shower than that, no other shelter than Krishna's lotus feet. So in the purport there, Srila Prabhupada writes that Krishna consciousness thus automatically constitutes perfect knowledge. Since Lord Krishna is the ultimate shelter of all living entities, the words Abhihatasya and Abhivarsat are significant in this verse. Abhihatasya indicates one who is being defeated on all sides by the onslaught of material nature, whereas Abhivarsat indicates a downpour of nectar that eliminates all the problems of material existence. So by our intelligence, we should look beyond the dull material body and nonsensical material mind to observe the unlimited shower of blissful nectar coming from the two lotus feet of Lord Krishna. Then our real good fortune will begin. So it's interesting in this particular verse, he says that we have such a tremendous desire, like a huge, huge desire and endeavor to get the most teensy, insignificant material happiness. So it's not even balanced. We're working so hard for something so insignificant. But we have to use our intelligence, as Prabhupada says, that we should, look beyond this dull, insignificant, nonsensical, material body, nonsensical mind, and just try to see that unlimited shower of blissful nectar coming from Krishna's lotus feet. So we could see every living entity in the 11th canto. There's a nice purport there described by the devotees saying, every living entity should put aside his false prestige based on ephemeral bodily qualifications, and appeal sincerely to the Supreme Lord Krishna for his mercy. The Lord hears every sincere appeal from even the most fallen soul, and the effects of the Lord's mercy are wonderful. Although jnanis, yogis, and fruitive workers are laboriously endeavoring to achieve their respective goals, their position is precarious and uncertain. Simply by achieving the mercy of Lord Krishna, however, one can very easily attain the highest perfection of life. If even one who's not a great or pure devotee of Lord Krishna sincerely appeals to the Lord for his mercy, the Lord is sure to give it generously. So just like he says here, even yogis and jnanis, they're laboriously endeavoring to achieve. So they want to achieve these things. They're so hardly receiving, but they get something so insignificant. And not only that, it's temporary. It's gone in a short amount of time. So there's many great acharyas, they sing, "When will my mind be cleared of all dirty things, so I'll be able to see Vrindavan as it is? And when will I be able to understand the literature left by the 6 Goswamis, so that I will be able to understand the transcendental pastimes of Radha and Krishna?" So Prabhupada actually said in one of his purports of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, because we live in the temples of Radha Krishna and continuously hold Harinam Sankirtan, the chanting of Hare Krishna, we consequently live in Vrindavan and nowhere else. And in another lecture that he gave on the Chaitanya Charitamrita, he says here, in other words, if we want to understand Radha and Krishna and Chaitanya philosophy, then we should try to follow the instructions left by Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami. They are the commander-in-chief in this movement. So we see all that nectar is coming through these great souls like Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami. It's handed down in the parampara system. They have that grass. They've been chewing on it and just, meditating on it and just, really, really understanding it. And then they give it to us like nectar. And eventually we'll be able to see Vrindavan as it is. Even the great saints, they're praying, when will my mind be cleared so I'll be able to see this Vrindavan? It's so beautiful in the spiritual world. So that's the end of our presentation here today. And as we mentioned, these verses are like amṛtam, nectar. And just to repeat the verses again one more time. O best of the Brahmanas, my body is filled with dirty things, and my vision has been bitten by the serpent of pride. Due to my material conceptions, I am diseased. Your nectarian instructions are the proper medicine for one suffering from such a fever, and there are cooling waters for one scorched by heat. And then the next translation. Whatever doubts I have about a particular subject matter, I shall ask you about later. For the time being, these mysterious yoga instructions you have given me for self-realization appear very difficult to understand. Please repeat them in a simple way so that I can understand them. My mind is very inquisitive and I want to understand this clearly. So that's our topic today, was the Srimad-Bhagavatam, 5th Canto, Chapter 12, verses 2 to 3, which is entitled amṛtam, the nectar. Thank you. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srimad-Bhagavatam, all glories to Srila Prabhupada.